We are afraid of living, and therefore the past as ideas has become so important to us. It is really extraordinarily interesting to watch the operation of one's own thinking, just to observe how one thinks, where that action we call thinking springs from. Obviously from memory. The experiencer, who is the thinker, is the pleasure and the pain, and also the entity who gives nourishment to the pleasure and the pain. The thinker separates pleasure from pain. He doesn't see that in the very demand for pleasure, he is inviting pain and fear. Thought in human relationships is always demanding pleasure, which it covers by different words like loyalty, helping, giving, sustaining, serving. Thought is the breeder of duality in all our relationships. There is violence in us which gives us pleasure, but there is also the desire for peace, the desire to be kind and gentle. This is what is going on all the time in our lives. Thought not only breeds this duality in us, this contradiction, but it also accumulates the innumerable memories we have had of pleasure and pain. As every challenge is met in terms of the past, a challenge being always new, our meeting of the challenge will always be totally inadequate, hence contradiction, conflict, and all the misery and sorrow. Thought is matter. Energy functioning in a pattern becomes matter. Matter and energy are interrelated. The one cannot exist without the other, and the more harmony there is between the two, the more balance, the more active the brain cells are. Thought has set up this pattern of pleasure, pain, fear, and has been functioning inside it for thousands of years, and cannot break the pattern because it has created it. A new fact cannot be seen by thought. It can be understood later by thought, verbally, but the understanding of a new fact is not reality to thought. Thought can never solve any psychological problem. It can perform the most extraordinary tricks, and therefore it cannot be depended upon. But if you understand the whole structure of how you think, why you think, the words you use, the way you behave in your daily life, the way you talk to people, the way you walk, eat, if you are aware of all these things, then your mind will not deceive you. It becomes extraordinarily quiet, pliable, sensitive, alone, and in that state there is no deception whatsoever. In that state of attention, thought begins to wither away, without all the prejudices, the chattering, the dialogue, the images, the pictures. It is only in silence that you can observe the beginning of thought. If there is an awareness of how thought begins, then there is no need to control thought. There is a battle going on all the time between one thought and another, one desire and another, one pleasure dominating all other pleasures. But if there is an awareness of the beginning of thought, then there is no contradiction in thought. You will see, if you have gone this far in the journey, that you will respond to a challenge, not with the old brain, but totally anew. It is only when we give complete attention to a problem and solve it immediately, never carrying it over to the next day, the next minute, that there is solitude. Then, even if we live in a crowded house or are in a bus, we have solitude, and that solitude indicates a fresh mind, an innocent mind. Inwardly we are not free, and therefore there is no space. No virtue, no quality that is worthwhile, can function or grow without this vast space within oneself. And space and silence are necessary because it is only when the mind is alone, uninfluenced, untrained, not held by infinite varieties of experience, that it can come upon something totally new. Unless one lays the foundation, which is to be free from fear, free from sorrow, anxiety, and all the traps one lays for oneself, I do not see how it is possible for a mind to be actually quiet. This is one of the most difficult things to communicate. Communication between us implies, doesn't it, that not only must you understand the words I am using, but that we must both, you and I, be intense at the same time, not a moment later, or a moment sooner, and capable of meeting each other on the same level. And such communication is not possible when you are interpreting what you are reading according to your own knowledge, pleasure, or opinions, or when you are making tremendous effort to comprehend. We are trained from childhood to acquire and to achieve. The very brain cells themselves create and demand this pattern of achievement in order to have physical security. But psychological security is not within the field of attachment. We demand security in all our relationships, attitudes, and activities, but, as we have seen, there is actually no such thing as security. To find out for yourself that there is no form of security in any relationship, to realise that psychologically there is nothing permanent, gives a totally different approach to life. It is essential, of course, to have outward security, shelter, clothing, food, but that outward security is destroyed by the demand for psychological security. Obviously, the mere pursuit of the ideal of having a quiet mind is valueless, because the more you force it, the more narrow and stagnant it becomes. Control in any form, like suppression, produces only conflict, nor has an undisciplined life any value. It is not discipline first and then freedom. Freedom is at the very beginning, not at the end. To understand this freedom, which is the freedom from the conformity of discipline, is discipline itself. The very act of learning is discipline. After all, the root meaning of the word discipline is to learn. To study the whole psychological structure of authority within ourselves, there must be freedom. Negation of everything that has been considered worthwhile, such as outward discipline, leadership, idealism, is to study it. Then, that very act of studying is not only discipline, but the negative of it, and the very denial is a positive act. The only silence we know is the silence when noise stops, the silence when thought stops. But that is not silence. It is not the product of the brain cells which have understood the whole structure and say, "For God's sake, be quiet." Then the brain cells themselves produce the silence, and that is not silence. Nor is silence the outcome of attention, in which the observer is the observed. Then there is no friction. But that is not silence. When there is dying every day to the known, the hurts, the flatteries, to all the images you have made, to all your experiences, dying every day so that the brain cells themselves become fresh, young, innocent. But that innocency, that freshness, that quality of tenderness and gentleness, does not produce love. It is not the quality of beauty or silence. That silence, which is not the silence of the ending of noise, is only a small beginning. It is like going through a small hole to an enormous wide expansive ocean, to an immeasurable timeless state. Then perhaps you may come upon that mystery which nobody can reveal to you, and nothing can destroy. Pleasure dictates the form of experience we demand, and pleasure is the measure by which we measure the experience. Anything measurable is within the limits of thought and is apt to create illusion. You can have marvellous experiences and yet be completely deluded. You will inevitably see visions according to your conditioning, the projections of your own demands and urges. If thought can think about reality, it cannot be reality. We cannot recognize a new experience. We recognize only something we have already known, and therefore, when we say we have had a new experience, it is not new at all. Dependence on challenges and experiences to keep us awake only makes our minds duller. It doesn't really keep us awake at all. I have to be free of all demands, for the moment I demand, I will experience, and to be free of demand and satisfaction necessitates investigation into myself, and an understanding of the whole nature of demand. In that very demand that I must be happy is unhappiness. When one makes an effort to be good, in that very goodness is its opposite, evil. Everything affirmed contains its own opposite, and effort to overcome strengthens that against which it strives. And in the opposite there is what has been. So one must be free of this incessant demand, otherwise there will be no end to the corridor of duality. This means knowing yourself so completely that the mind is no longer seeking. Such a mind does not demand experience. It cannot ask for a challenge or know a challenge. Only the frustrated, narrow, shallow mind, the conditioned mind, is always seeking the more. Investigation into this whole question is meditation. When you understand the structure and origin of thought, that very understanding of the structure of thinking is its own discipline, which is meditation. Meditation is to be aware of every thought and of every feeling, never to say it is right or wrong, but just to watch it and move with it. In that watching you begin to understand the whole movement of thought and feeling. And out of this awareness comes silence, the silence that comes when thought has understood its own beginning, the nature of itself, understood how all thought is never free but always old. This silence is meditation, in which the meditator is entirely absent, for the mind has emptied itself of the past. Meditation is a state of mind which looks at everything with complete attention, totally. If any system teaches you how to be attentive, then you are attentive to the system, and that is not attention. When you learn about yourself, watch the way you walk, eat, what you say, the gossip, hate, the jealousy. If you are aware of all that in yourself without any choice, that is part of meditation. So meditation can take place when you are sitting in a bus, or walking in the woods full of light and shadows, or listening to the singing birds, or looking at the face of your wife or child. In the understanding of meditation there is love. Love can perhaps come into being when there is complete silence, a silence in which the meditator is entirely absent. And the mind can be silent only when it understands its own movement of thought and feeling. To understand this movement of thought and feeling, there can be no condemnation. That kind of discipline is fluid, free, not the discipline of conformity. The old brain cannot possibly solve the human problem of relationship. The old brain is Asiatic, European, American, or African. So, what we are asking ourselves is whether it is possible to bring about a mutation in the brain cells themselves. We have reduced the world to its present state of chaos by our self-centered activity, by our prejudices, our hatreds, our nationalism. And when we say we cannot do anything about it, we are accepting disorder in ourselves as inevitable. We have splintered the world into fragments, and if we ourselves are broken, fragmented, our relationship with the world will also be broken. But if when we act totally, then our relationship with the world undergoes a tremendous revolution. The religious mind is a state of mind in which there is no fear, and therefore no belief whatsoever, but only what actually is. In the religious mind there is that state of silence. In that state of silence there is a state of energy in which there is no conflict. Energy is action and movement. All action is movement, and all action is energy. All desire is energy. All feeling is energy. All thought, all living is energy, all life. If that energy is allowed to flow without any contradiction, without any friction, without any conflict, then that energy is boundless, endless. We need energy not only to bring about a total revolution in ourselves, but also in order to investigate, to look, to act. And as long as there is friction of any kind in any of our relationships, whether between husband and wife, man and man, one community and another community, or one country and another, or one ideology or another, if there is any inward friction or any outward conflict in any form, however subtle, there is a waste of energy. As long as there is a time interval between the observer and the observed, it creates friction, and therefore there is a waste of energy. That energy is gathered to its highest point when the observer is the observed, in which there is no time interval at all. Then there will be energy without motive, and it will find its own channel of action, because then the I does not exist. We need a tremendous amount of energy to understand the confusion in which we live, and the feeling, I must understand, brings about the vitality to find out. Whether we are old or young, it is now that the whole process of life can be brought into a different dimension. There is no other problem, because when the mind is made new, it can tackle any problem. What I say has very little value. You will forget it the moment you shut this book, or you will remember and repeat certain phrases, or you will compare what you have read here with some other book, but you will not face your own life. And that is all that matters: your life, yourself, your pettiness, your shallowness, your violence, your greed, ambition, agony, and endless sorrow. That is what you have to understand, and nobody on earth or in heaven is going to save you from it but yourself. When you know yourself as you are, then you understand the whole structure of man's endeavour, his deceptions, his hypocrisies, his search. To do this, You must be tremendously honest with yourself throughout your being. That state of mind, which is no longer capable of striving, is the true religious mind. And in that state of mind, you may come upon this thing called truth, or reality, or bliss, or God, or beauty, or love. This thing cannot be invited. The mind is too silly, too small. Your emotions are too shoddy, your way of life too confused for that enormity. To invite it, you must know it, and you cannot know it. Through complete negation alone, which is the highest form of passion, that thing which is love comes into being. When you give your mind and your heart, your nerves, your eyes, your whole being to find out the way of life, to see what actually is and go beyond it, and deny completely, totally, the life you live now, in that very denial of the ugly, brutal, the other comes into being, and you will never know it either. A man who knows that he is silent, who knows that he loves, does not know what love is or what silence is.